Hey, thank you for joining us, everyone, again for season 2, episode 1 of Asymmetric Power. And here I am, Dr. Vanessa Neumann and
Dr. Brearley. Nice to see you guys.
Dr. Emily Brearley, Doctor. I remember. Do you remember that movie? What was it called? Spies Like Us, where is it? Yeah, it's not Belushi. Is it John Belushi? No, it's not Belushi, but and they go around and they're in the sort of, it's during the Cold War and they're about to sort of face Russia and there's all these hot scientists and they go, doctor. I feel like that's what happens when you and I get together.
Anyway. It reminds me of the James Bond movie when one of the hot Bond girls came on and announced that she was a nuclear physicist. I was in the cinema and everybody burst out laughing. And I was like, why can't you be hot and a nuclear physicist? God damn it.
Absolutely.
Denise
and
Richards.
Fast forward a few years later and they are. I had a really good friend of mine who works for, I should not say her name, but one of the big aerospace and defense companies. There's not that many of them. And we were seated together at a lunch for a Latin American president who I will also not name. And some guy's like, hey, pretty ladies, what do you do? And I'm like, well, I have a background in security and she's a rocket scientist. And she's like, yeah,
so rocket scientist.
And with like her pretty blonde hair and her, her impeccable manicure. She's like, yeah, I built I won't say, I built the, fighter jets that your country is buying.
This is a good segue into what you wanted to discuss with me, which was a new report on the younger generation, men and women, and how differently their priorities are laid out.
Yes.
Do you want to talk about that study you sent me? I thought it was fascinating.
Yeah, it is. So it's basically, the sense of identity and what people want out of relationships has really changed. So there's sort of two forces at play, right? There's that study that I sent you was really about sort of Gen Z, the really young ones. Is that under 25 or is it under 30? But
we should know this, but we're old.
We should know this, but we're too freaking old. That's the issue. We are not Gen Z. We're not even Gen Y. I'm Gen X, okay? X. But did you notice my Wonder Woman reference?
Yes,
I grew up watching Wonder Woman. That's how friggin' old I am.
Love her.
Linda Carter's now in her 70s and she looks great. But there's two things, right? So they've polled that these Gen Zers want radically different things from relationships, and this is leading to a drop in marriage, right? And it's also leading to not just a drop in marriage, which is, the family unit has long been viewed and understood, and this better than anyone, as an economist who's worked in communities, is sort of what keeps the heart of like the dots that are the nexus, the nexi in a community, right? So when that family unit, you go, changes or significantly alters, then what do you do? What does that mean? If they don't want to get married and they want to either the men want children more than the women want children, I think was the study. And then the other thing that's happening, do you want to talk about that? What was the study? What did they say?
Well, what's interesting to me is that there are 12 options, and they look at females who voted for Harris and males who voted for Trump. So I feel that already is a bit of a wonky cohort because they're not same. So they're trying to find the cohorts that would likely most disagree with one another. I think if you looked at men who voted for Harris, they might have a similar list to the women who voted for Harris. But the big headline is basically that women put, of 12 options, having children at number 12. And men who voted for Trump put having children and a family at number 1 and 2.
Right.
So
interesting.
The big headline is that women and men are from Mars, women are from Venus, and want completely different things.
Well, it seems like the women are from Mars these days. I mean, The men are like saying, love and marriage and a baby carriage. And the women are like, maybe not, they're the sort of getting a little bit more warrior-like. But it would be interesting to me. So as an economist, I know you have your, serious criticisms of the data set, but it's still illustrative of what exactly? Like in your view, how does this translate? I mean, to me, it seems like you're going to have, even in couples, like big political divisions. Even if the data is skewed, it seems like the likelihood of, in a couple, the woman voting one way and the man voting another has still increased. Am I reading that right?
I don't know if couples who disagree politically are going to find themselves in marriage. I think what's going to happen is traditional women will find themselves married to the men who want to get married, because a lot of women still want to get married and have children. And then in the cities, you will see women living with boyfriends, situationships, because the men in cities, and you know this, you've lived in New York, I've lived in DC. Did you just
use the word situationships?
I did. I'm very cool.
Because
I
in
know
Venezuela,
what it
we
means.
say, tengo una situación.
Yeah. ¿En serio?
We call it in
Spanish,
una situación. Like it's not really like, you don't want to give it an official title. You say, bueno, voy por ahí a ver mi situación.
Una situación.
I didn't know that was a thing in English.
Someone who's quite, I've always been kind of Christian, lapse, and then got back into it again. I've never had a situationship. I always wanted to be married and have kids, but I'm also lefty, so I'm a bit of a weirdo. But I think we are the first generation, our X generation, that didn't have to get married, of women. Right. Our mums, they could have a career if they, they could, but still they really had to get married. Our generation really does not have to get married to support ourselves and to have an interesting, fulfilling life. And that is important. And that means that a bunch of dudes who are really unmarriageable because they are not good looking enough, don't make enough money, don't know how to talk to women because they're online too much. There's this whole subset of dudes who then become incels.
The incels.
And I think that's just that is supply and demand. There is not enough good dudes to marry. The good dudes still do get married and they get snapped up. And then we are left with a lot of grumpy women, as we saw in Sex and the City, as I've seen with my own girlfriends complaining about, I can't date in LA and I can't date in New York. And oh my God, the douchebags in DC. Women do complain about this. So, and these are women in their 30s and 40s. So in your 20s, you think it's all fun and games and you don't really care. But in 30s and 40s, what I have heard from my girlfriends is not, I want to get married. It's, I desperately want to get married and have kids. And there's no one who wants to do that with me. So I think if you looked at this data,
so reality just hits.
Precisely.
Like, no matter what the advances are, and, there's egg freezing and IUI and IVF, and heck, I'm not old enough to know about that subject as well. It still gets harder. You freeze your eggs, and then afterwards they tell you, oh, by the way, there's crystals in them, like you get with ice. So they don't. It ain't the same as a fresh batch, I
don't trust. I don't even eat frozen chicken. I don't think I would do egg freezing. I think it's a big old money making scam. If you want to have babies, you need to have babies.
Yeah, exactly.
That's the advice I give to women. If you want to have babies, you're going to need to have babies. Don't wait.
And the moment's never right. You're never prepared. You're never rich enough or stable enough or sorted enough, or it's just parenthood is like something you've just got to like dive in, hold your nose on the way down, pick hard so you don't drown, and you just find a way to make it work. There's no manual and there's no perfection. I do find it fascinating, Vanessa, that in our 20s we're told whatever you do, don't get pregnant. And then you hit 30 and it's like, quick, you need to be pregnant. Women are faced with this perennial dilemma that can never be solved. That it's better to have children younger because it's easier on your body, but it's better to have children later because it's easier on your career. And you just cannot. That's how it shakes out.
There's
And they
no
don't
good
meet.
answer to
They
that.
don't meet.
They don't
And the
mean
other thing,
biology
that this has led
and
to,
industrialization don't, they clash.
no, they clash. They clash. I mean, there's just, you hit up with against the reality of biology. And the other thing the other clash that I feel that we're having, along with, the Gen Zers, diverging, and that when we're seeing that play out, in families, but also politically, the other thing we're seeing is in our old age is, marriage is falling apart because, and there's a new phrase that has come up, and I was discussing this with a friend of mine who's even older than I am, explaining the concept of man keeping, right? It's all over the internet that, and I can sort of understand that, right? I'm a single mom by choice, a single mom by choice. I chose to have a child on my own, is what I mean by that, which is a slightly different calculus than trying it out with someone else. And then even if you get divorced, there's still another parent, right? So there's still someone else to do the school pickups or the PTA meetings or pick up the slack. When you choose to be on your own, it just like, there never is and never will be, someone else who's the parent of that child. So that's one thing. And there are others. I mean, there's like one other in my kid's school and in her grade who made a similar choice to mine. And then what you have is, but what I do have a lot of in the school, for example, if we stick with that sample, and maybe it's a rarefied sample, is you have quite a few women who like work hard and they have these successful careers, right? They're executives. You've met a couple of them, they're executives, and then they still sit down and do homework with their kids, even though they're frazzled. And even they're still at the, soccer match or football match, as we say here, and still checking the emails. And then they just kind of don't have patience to put up with keeping a man in terms of like, dude, I don't know where your golf clubs or tennis rackets are. I don't know, if you made the table reservation to meet with your buddies, you need to kind of, they don't, they're not willing to play that role of being that traditional role of being like, I'll manage your agenda, I'll attend to your emotional needs, I'll attend to your sexual needs, on the spot. Here's you'll forgive the vulgarity. I hope we don't get deleted for it.
I love vulgarity.
There's no, your slippers are martini and a blowjob. Doesn't work for a woman who's already coming home frazzled and is also a present mother. So you're seeing a lot of when
Vanessa,
when the kids get of a certain age or when they leave, they get divorced. Yeah, the women walk out.
I mean, if you look at the data, I did a study with Melinda Gates a couple of years ago, the Melinda Gates Foundation,
Right.
and we looked at the burden of housework and this emotional work that you're talking about. And even in rich Western societies, women still do the bulk of cooking and cleaning and caring for older parents once you get older and doing this emotional load for their husbands. I think during COVID, this was raised to the fore. This is when we did the study because
right.
men were at home and they thought, Jesus Christ, kids are really annoying and difficult to look after and it takes a lot of work, and they realized it. But this just hasn't really shifted. I only know one marriage of my acquaintance where the housework and the emotional load is really split 50-50. Even more than that, he takes the majority of the burden. I would say it's 60-40. And this is a guy who is an Indian surgeon. So he works very long hours. Yeah, he works very long hours, but he cooks, he organizes trips, he organizes the children's school. And it's really interesting to see because he says that he is absolutely not a feminist. He is a traditional man. He can even make some really sort of bordering on sexist comments sometimes, but he's a wonderful husband and parent because he actually, his deeds are taking on that load. But at some point I have seen every single girlfriend I know, and I have friends all over the world in all different economic brackets complain about this issue. And I don't know how you
All
solve it.
economic practice,
Maybe what you do is like me, you get married later in life and you really pick the person not based on procreation but based on their personality. But I don't know, that was a bit of a stressful route. I wouldn't advise it for everyone, but now I'm very happy.
Right.
And I feel like I have one of the healthiest marriages in my friendship group, because but we didn't meet in our 20s and have children. So maybe if we had done that, by this
That's a
point, we'd
different
hate
thing.
each other. I don't know.
Well, and well, exactly. And I think also as you get older, you have the advantage of having a greater sense of who you are, and I think that's something that changes as you get older. I mean, I would have told you 5 years ago I knew who I was, and I'll tell you right now, my concept of myself as a woman, as a mother, as a professional is radically different as a friend than it was 5 years ago. So, and I wanted to make a slightly clunky segue on the issue of burden of work and identity, and shift it to security and defense in Europe, because what's going on in Europe?
Well, Europe is from Venus and America is from Mars. Is that
exactly
how we used to see it? And they want different things. Europe wants the welfare state, and America wants military spending, the guns.
Right. So, but now I'm living in Europe, having worked in the US and, many years, and for many years worked with the gun toting Americans, the Defense Department, etc. And, deep love and respect. But now I'm in Europe and they're feeling like they're being abandoned by the US. Russia's encroaching. And there's a big thing about let's rearm. Now, it was before the invasion of Ukraine and before the abandonment by Trump, whether or not it is that way, that's the way it's perceived and received in Europe. So let's stick to that framing, because that's like the European framing, or the imminent abandonment by Trump, where they're looking at not just like, hey, dude, we're not going to provide the personnel for the wars, but we might actually just pull out completely, which means take the stuff on big ships and move it across the ocean, like the absence of military commanders and personnel. And there's a very serious study done by the International Institute for Security Studies, a great military think tank I started with my career with, and they've done like, it will take €1 trillion, 1 trillion with a T, euros, to replace America. And if you have peace with Ukraine, Russia will rearm faster.
Yes.
So they will be able to rearm faster and be right at the border. And then you've got no America. And you've got this big gaping hole if you have peace with Ukraine. And so now what has happened, like Europe was tearing itself apart. Everybody's like, I want out. We were having like, not the Brexit, but the EU exit of, various countries. And the Visegrad Four were like, we are not really European. And then now they don't want to be European, they want to be NATO member states. So EU is like thumbs down and NATO's like thumbs up, as my little girl would say.
I see money being shifted from development budgets, which used to be, my realm, into defense budgets, which is and talked about that in the press. Germany is reducing its aid budget, the UK, France by 60%, so that they can invest in security. And that is the way it's framed in the press. You're literally going from Mars to Venus, or Venus to Mars.
Venus to Mars, absolutely.
What I think is interesting.
They still want to use their Europeanness, and now they're like, we will be, and literally the CEO of Rheinmetall said yesterday or the day before, it was the biggest military contractor in Germany, and therefore one in Europe, one of the ones in Europe, said, we are building stuff from Europe for Europe in a European way. And we must have big boy thinking. We don't want to be the small boy to America. And one day we will be a reliable partner for the United States. So those who want the money are casting this as not a stick it to America, but a let's grow Europe. And maybe America will come back to us on equal footing.
Yes.
What do you think about that?
I think I think that's a fascinating vision, really fascinating. I hope everybody listening to this podcast takes that soundbite, because that for me encapsulates perhaps the optimistic way of looking at this. My only concern is that right now, European leaders are couching this as, we're taking money away from African babies because anyway, you guys know that aid didn't work, right? And we're
Right.
taking that money that was corrupt anyway and being spent on silly things, and we're going to put it into security because you've seen what happened in Ukraine. You saw what Russia did. We don't trust Donald Trump, and people are behind that. They like that narrative. But once you get to the point where it's like, well, actually, we don't have enough money just stealing from aid budgets, because the aid budgets weren't very big anyway. We're going to have to take from your welfare state budget. We're going to have to take from the bigger pot. That's when I think we might see issues. And, people in Europe aren't particularly patriotic the way that they are in America. And I think they might say, you know what, I really like my retiring at, why can you retire in France? It's like 58, and then you live until you're 95 because you have such a good diet. People like their nice things in Europe, and I am questioning whether they actually want to give them up. Yes, and there are siestas, and I just visited you in Spain and was reminded of how gorgeous it is to live in Europe. It's a wonderful standard of living, great food, more relaxed. But there is the bill will come. The bill will come. And I'm wondering if governments will be punished by the electorate in Europe for making this switch and investing in security. It's going to be a fine balance. I still think it's going to happen.
Well, I think
what do you think?
What's good about it, and I'm, this is maybe my optimism, but then, I work in this, so maybe I want to view it optimistically, is that it is becoming a we need to innovate in Europe. So it is becoming an opportunity. Now, you can't build everything from scratch. You can't be like, I don't want, fill in large American contractor here, and there are several of them. I could, one Northrop Grumman or General Dynamics or Palantir or Anduril, but we're going to grow our own. Well, wait a minute. You don't have it's really hard to do this thing. You don't have the innovation mindset. You have too much red tape. Your venture capital markets don't have the liquidity or the depth. You just don't have the VC environment that pushes this kind of innovation. You don't have the regulatory framework that pushes that innovation. And so what they're doing is that this is what I'm in, is they're effectively buying components and because everything now has to be about innovation, it's forcing even the big prime contractors, and I do think this is good, to take the little chickadees under their wing, right? They still have control, but now they've got to be like, look, I've got, this innovator and that innovator and that innovator, and I'm going to bring them along with me. And, for lack of a better system, at least it's, the little smart guys are getting a chance, and they weren't before. And so I think that's good. But it also reminds me, the whole concept of European identity has always fascinated me, because as you say, it was sort of based on that sort of concept of a welfare state, right? Like we have siestas and we have
live well. We redistribute our taxes fairly.
Right.
We have we have a healthy Gini coefficient, and look at the awful Americans who don't.
Right. It's literally in the Spanish Constitution that thou shalt not be homeless. Literally.
Yeah. Wow.
Yeah, which is a thing. And thou shalt have access to a park. Literally in the Constitution. So
beautiful.
Anyway, but on the other hand, I remember when I was in grad school and I was working on my dissertation, and I was looking at the issue of national identity. I was reading Habermas, who wrote about German reunification, and he had the view that, America was the first successful national mythology, right? It was not based on a shared history of victimization. This was his view, and I think it was very valid back in 1989 or 1990 when it was published. that it was this great myth, right? You have this Constitution, the Declaration of the United States of America, and then there's this Constitution, and we all abide by these rules of engagement. And it doesn't matter how you became American, but you're American now when we play by these rules. A lot of that has changed in the recent years.
Yeah.
But the concept of being European was like, I am French, I hate the British. The Spanish had the Spanish Armada, and they pranced around, lobbing cannonballs at everyone across the ocean, and the Brits hate them too. And it, the miracle of the European Union was, how do you get these countries that had for millennia fought against each other to sort of form a monetary union, and without a fiscal union, which is another thing you can talk about another time, is, and yet get to sort of agree. And now what has happened is, in a way, their sense of victimization is making them European again. They're like, oh my God,
Yes.
we're all going to be invaded by Russia. So that
Yes.
whole dynamic of we are French, or we are German, or we are British, or we are Italian, or, because of the people who invaded us and the people we hate, we mutually hate.
Yes.
Is forging a new European identity.
Thank God for the bogeyman of Russia. In my dissertation, I talked about, I made the contention that we had a welfare state in Europe.
There's a pull-out quote.
Yeah, because I think we have the welfare state in Europe, the lovely welfare state that I, as a Brit, have always deified, and because we had the bogeyman of communist USSR. And after World War II, remember, Churchill lost the election because the poor men and women who had fought in the war felt that they deserved a national healthcare service and basic social insurance. But it was the fear the elites had of the alternative, which was total takeover by the working classes, that prompted them to say, okay, we'll redistribute a little bit. And now, once again, Deus ex machina, in comes Russia to be a very convenient bogeyman to unite Europe, not around the European Union, but around NATO. Fear can be a great uniter. And I think that's why probably your optimistic assessment will carry through, and Europe will be able to create, with your help, some kind of, robust security infrastructure that it's obvious now it needs. Well, I need to figure out how a little development economist fits into this, because I have whiplash, because aid is dead in its old form. I obviously still feel that I want to work with big industrial players in these frontier markets to make sure that, as far as possible, we help people on the planet. I don't think those things are mutually exclusive. No, it's absolutely possible.
It's enlightened pragmatism. If you're going to operate somewhere in some frontier market, you need to have proper community relations. You can't be tone deaf. You can't mistreat the locals, because they're going to come back and bite you. And
the locals themselves,
doing good and doing right is good business eventually. I mean, it's not a zero-sum game. It makes it bigger, makes the prosperity pot bigger.
Yeah, I know that local communities would much rather work with Exxon than the World Bank. I know that's really shocking, but they know what they're getting with Exxon, and they have been burned so many times by the aid business that they just don't trust them anymore. At least they're like, well, the bad guys are honest.
Right.
And, this is a business transaction. They want to do this. We want to make sure that, we actually want our country to grow and have the, as the Guyanese recently said, why can't we exploit our oil resources? Who are you to tell us, the West, that we can't do this? So I think it's a really interesting time. We need to talk more about this.
Yeah, no, that would be great. Yeah, let's talk about that more next time. I mean, I feel like, as you say, the Exxons or the big miners of the world, also people know what they're getting. They're getting, a job, they're getting, or some local healthcare if they ask for it, if they require it. And whereas I think that the handouts feel humiliating.
Yeah.
If you know, if you spend time, I mean, I have a bit, but you spent far more than I time with these communities. You know, they want their dignity. Their dignity is
Yeah.
important to them. So
Correct. It's a
anyway,
lovely way to end. It's so nice to see you again. I will see you
so
again
nice to
soon.
see you. So let's hear it. So dignity for women in relationships, be you in
Yes.
your 20s or in your 50s. And then and dignity for a rearming Europe. I mean, I'm going to the NATO Industrial Forum, and the title is Rearm Europe. I mean, they're not being subtle about it, you know, and they want to be, and they also want not to come, they don't want to bring the slippers and martini to the United States. You know, if they get this right, they want to be maybe like, let's talk as equal partners. So we'll see. So next time you're going to tell us about how we do this for local communities in this
I will.
geopolitical change. Okay.
Brilliant. All right, my dear. Lovely
All
to
right, my
see you.
dear. Lovely to see you. Lovely to see you. Thank you.
Bye.
Bye. Bye.